again, everybody. Welcome to day two. We've got a shorter day ahead of us, which I think we're probably all happy about. We can only do so much Zoom, but I'll just get things rolling right away. So up first, we have Andrea Gilbert-Eckman presenting on her Preventive Controls for Human Foods Needs Assessment. Andrea Gilbert-Eckman is a PhD candidate with the Department of Nutrition and Food Science at the University of Maryland, College Park. Andrea, I think you have some slides to put up, so I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Since we are having a discussion-heavy day today, I decided to sort of frame this presentation as almost like a warm-up for the larger main discussion. So this is an update on the needs assessment that the Preventive Controls subgroup has been working on for the past couple of years. And so this is just an update as we finally sort of wrap this up and bring this together. So to recap, we conducted a processor food safety needs assessment, and it was developed to identify resource needs for small and very small processors in the Northeast. And the survey was sent to food safety communicators via email. We actually had 2 rounds of the survey. The first was open from August to December of 2019, and then the second survey was open from June to August of 2021. So to start off, we'll just have a reminder about the term food safety communicators, because it was a term kind of coined by Dr. Luke Laborde for the awareness subgroup. So instead of trying to reach firms directly, we are going to try to talk to the people who we're going to try to identify and communicate with the people who do talk to firms more directly. So this is sort of who we deemed fell into the food safety communicators group. And this is just a data table from the first survey where we have the food safety communicators, and our top 2 groups for the respondents for the first round of the surveys were consultants and extension agents. And then the second category was other, which was divided into other categories that we had not thought of yet, such as incubators and shared kitchens, which are a growing space in the a growing area in small and very small food processing. So to recap, here are some summary questions from the first survey. We asked, how important do you think the following challenges are for small and very small food processors? And the top one was lack of awareness and understanding of the regulation, which was touched upon by our 2 panelists from yesterday. Lack of scientific knowledge of potential hazards, also discussed yesterday, and then lack of knowledge regarding cost of implementation. We then asked about specific monetary challenges, and the top 2 responses were the cost for hiring additional workers and the cost of paying third-party consultants for developing food safety programs. And we also asked about the following training challenges, among other questions, and the top 3 challenging issues that were identified were the lack of time for training, the materials were too advanced for a lot of the trainees that were attending, as well as the costs for training classes, which may also be an issue that Donna Schaffner brought up yesterday in her presentation about the fact that now that we return to in-person, the increase in food costs and all of those logistics could negatively impact the ability of small and very small producers to attend training courses that they would need to attend. So also to address something brought up earlier, we asked why 2 surveys. So in analysis, when I was breaking it up by responder types, I noticed that there was a marked difference in opinions from instructors, which were lead instructors for the Preventive Controls for Human Foods course, and then for regulators. And they were a pretty decent chunk of the food safety communicators that responded to the first round of the survey. And so as you can see, there was a noticeable drop-off and a noticeable difference in opinions for regulators. And once the first survey concluded, I had thought that this could indicate that regulators don't see, like regulators think that the training is ineffective and that training changes may need to be made across the board. We may need to develop new training courses specifically for small and very small processors. But then upon further digging into the data, I also saw that a lot of the regulators that responded to the first round of the survey did not work as closely with small and very small processors as compared to the lead instructors for the PCHF course or the extension professionals who responded. So we conducted a second survey this year over the summer, and we targeted it directly to the regulators that we did not get who responded to the first survey. And so I've termed those inspectors for this slide. And so these responses are sort of more in line with each other. And there's not this 30% gap in terms of opinions on coursework as compared to before. So seeing the inspectors who did work rather closely with the regulator, who did work rather closely with these small and very small firms, their opinions seem to align more closely with the instructors, which was very good because had we not conducted the second survey, we might have drawn a completely wrong conclusion, which is that, we need to completely overhaul resources and what we are providing to small and very small processors. So another nice thing about having two surveys is that we were able to draw I was able to draw a pretty interesting conclusion here. This was asked on the first survey. So these questions were just asked of lead instructors we asked, when teaching the PCQI course, which sections do you think are more challenging for small and very small food processors to understand and implement? And the top three responses were validation procedures, hazard analysis, and verification procedures. And then for the second round of the survey, we asked these questions just of the inspectors, and we asked what common misunderstandings the facilities have about the PCHF requirements during inspections. And the top three were verification procedures, validation procedures, and hazard analysis. And then the most common non-compliance observations that were turned over by inspectors, that were stated by inspectors in the survey response, were validation procedures, hazard analysis, and then verification procedures and supply chain controls are tied, but the top three are nearly the same. So there's a bit of a through line between the concepts that are hardest to teach in the course and the areas that small and very small processors are sort of having issues with being in compliance in. So now we sort of have an area that we can focus in on, and now we can figure out sort of how do we best respond to those needs. So in the first and second survey, we also asked, when contacted for further assistance, what types of information are small and very small processors looking for? And so the top three were a template or model food safety plan, where to find training classes, and then process authority contact information. And then we also asked, based on your experience, what delivery methods are most helpful. And so one-on-one training advice and consultation, what came in first, followed by training workshops, and then printed fact sheets and videos. Most other things, there was a pretty strong drop off between the top two, where you had one-on-one engagement and in-person interaction, and then everything else was substantially lower. So we'll be moving on to the discussion. And so we have 3 poll questions that we'll go deeper into. So let's see if Annie, if you could launch the poll. So, and before we get into the discussion, does anybody have any questions? Okay. So for question one, I am not a lead instructor for the Preventive Controls for Human Food course, but my advisor, Dr. Tekar, is. So I've assisted with a number of training courses. And I've noticed while serving as an instructor that a lot of the course takers from very small firms tend to sort of get stuck in the hazard analysis chapter, and they sort of are not able to sort of process that information and move forward from that and complete the rest of the workbook exercises during the course. So, Annie, do you have the poll results? Okay.
Yep, so
yes, so the poll results are on the screen, and I just wanted to check, make sure that I wasn't off base with this observation, and it does not. It does appear that I am not off base. So the follow-up question I have for that is, has anyone had success in getting processors through this challenge while teaching or even after teaching? Okay, and so just responding to Shauna's question, we had, I believe, 100 respondents for the first round of surveys, and then I believe we had 60 respondents for the second round of surveys, but only a portion of those responses were actually complete. And then for question two, I've noticed while assistant teaching that a lot of the course takers will recommend to other course takers that they should possibly consider getting an audit for a potential grocery store customer. And that has helped them a lot. So that was another observation that might be beneficial moving forward. And I wanted to ask if anybody felt that a voluntary GMP or mock audit could be a good way for producers to test their food safety plans. All right, and thank you. I'm also not off base on this one. So has anybody found any useful ways? Has anybody found any useful ways to help processors with food safety plan development, particularly for verification and validation of preventive controls?
Andrea, do you want us to use the chat or shout out?
Shout out. Yeah, shout out.
So I have tried to coerce participants to jump to the next processing step, because the receiving seems to be like a sky is falling approach. They have no orientation about what a hazard is, and then they get into the weeds about the film, packaging film, when the real hazards, while those are important. So I jump to a process that they all know and actually do, and then guide them into be thinking about why those activities could be more challenging. And then later we can focus on receiving, but receiving tends to be a hard one to start with. So I jump to a process.
And anyone else?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here. One of the things on your second question there that I don't agree with would be the fact that, a third-party audit would be, good for hazard analysis. A lot of times these guys who are coming into these operations for third-party inspections have less clue than you do about the products that you're making. And, I think one of the things, certainly, I think third-party audits are great part of, especially in terms of evaluating GMPs and all of that. But to think that they're going to come in and do and have an impact on your hazard analysis, I think it's way off base. And I think it's, in fact, would be even misleading from the standpoint that that you can come out of an audit and have great score, and it really has nothing to do with your process at all.
Okay.
And so I would be very hesitant to suggest that ever.
Okay.
And that's based on many, many, many years of experience.
Okay. So making sure that things are specific to the
third-party audits are great. You can have somebody come in and do a third-party audit. And again, from a GMP perspective, I'm all for that. Even providing some basic knowledge, fine. But when it comes down to it and doing your hazard analysis, now what we've done is we always make sure that, we provide after after class support, and go to great lengths to make sure that anybody who goes through the class, when they leave, is that they can call and we set up times, in fact, for people to call up and just to walk through those basic components, because it's difficult. You go through the receiving of ingredients, you have to have at least some basic understanding of that. And also, beyond that, then is going through your process, and it can be pretty overwhelming for people who have never done it before. And so, a lot of the support that we provide is that after class support, they go back through. And we were talking about this yesterday with Annie, and yourself. A lot of times people come through a class and they, it's so important for them not to put that book on that shelf, like to start to dig into it, start to work on it. And, I think the hard part is when they get further away from it in terms of time, the harder it becomes for them to go back and do it. So getting somebody to pick up that book, to look at it, and to get them to call you with questions, even if the most basic questions. And that's where we've had the most success in terms of, getting people to do it. And I think the other thing that we do, we always try to do in classes, to use a few different types of examples, especially examples that people can relate to, and an easy one would be, cooking a turkey in your own, or cooking a chicken, and thinking about the hazard analysis from the ingredient perspective, and then from a process perspective within your own kitchen is always a lot more relatable to some people, especially if they've not done this type of activity before. So, having a really basic example to allow them to work through that is, at least in their mind, and talk about it in class is always, I always find that very, very useful as well.
Yes, Donna.
So I was going to say, one of the things that has worked really well for us is when we ask people to take the HACCP course first and then take the preventive controls course. And in the HACCP course, we really concentrate on how you do the hazard analysis and work that out with products that the people are familiar with. Then if they come in and take the preventive controls course, it's much easier. If they come in cold turkey to the preventive controls course with the way it's laid out right now, I don't spend a huge amount of time on the breakout for the hazard analysis part of it, because they just don't have enough information at that point. And just sort of say, okay, here are the answers they give for those model breakout programs. We sort of talk through those just sort of quickly, and then we go into where that breaks out and each type of preventive control, because then those are the concrete examples that help them understand, I think, better than the hazard analysis chapter in the book. Because if they don't have that background, they don't know how to do that chapter, that breakout. But you have to introduce them to the information in that chapter, so that when you do go into the more specific chapters after that, they can think about, okay, well, when we went through that other chapter, remember they had this listed, this is why. So it's sort of the way you structure that information, I think, helps a lot. Because if you just go straight through the curriculum now and go to that chapter, that is overwhelming for the people who don't have the background.
Okay. Thank you so much to both Donna and Martin. And I just have a follow-up for any other instructors present. Have you found any ways to help people with their verification and validation? Because that has also been, that was also identified as two of the harder concepts to teach. And then two of the areas that had both violations and citations and inspections. And Martin in particular, if
I think on the same thing on that, with the validation is always, that we, having done meet HACCP and forever, which always becomes, like validation support in that is always, it's just that on, like, making sure that people know that, like, validation is something that, there's in-plant validation, you have, other, the scientific validation for the process, and making sure that you collect that information. And so, and I'm going to guess a lot of us do that, because I certainly do a lot of it, which is providing that or helping provide validation support for process, and so, and that's one of the things that we can do because we have access to the literature. We have access to a lot of information. And so I think it's, again, when people leave class, it's like, make sure that when you're going through and you're looking at and thinking about validation that, you contact us because we can, help provide that type of information, which is not always easy. It's not an easy thing to do, is to get a hold of some of the information that you're looking for or how to get to look for, or what you may need, in fact. And so I think as extension professionals, I think that's one of the things that certainly gives us an advantage, especially over a lot of our, our the other people out there that are doing training, because I don't feel, maybe I'm overstating it, but I think we're so a lot more closer to the science than some of these, these third-party trainers are, and having access to the library systems and such, we can do a great job in terms of that. So, again, making sure people know, like when you go out and you're thinking about this. Another thing I'll add on this is just as we saw with Meet HACCP, and Meet HACCP is rolled out whatever year it was now, like 1996, right? So it's certainly over 20 years, and validation still comes up. And we find now inspectors, going to facilities, the inspectors are at a point now where validation has become a lot more important. When we start off and we do this type of training and implementation, a lot of times inspectors are really kind of focused on the basics initially. These inspectors aren't, highly trained. They're going into this thing for the first time, thinking about food safety plans and all of that. They're not at the point where they're digging into the systems enough to understand what validation is. But I can bet, just as we saw with Meet HACCP, that as time goes on, that validation areas are going to become that next phase where inspectors are going to start asking those questions about process and how that process has been validated.
I'm sorry, Donna.
No, go ahead, Lori.
Well, coming from seafood, as most of you know, I think one of the issues with this program is not a codified guidance document or something for folks to use. As everybody knows, we have the seafood hazards and controls guides, and I've taught seafood since I don't even want to mention. And I have to say that obviously that guidance keeps evolving. And I do think that as we teach it and we show them how to use it, it makes it a little easier for them because the information is right there. Unfortunately, validation is always problematic, whatever you're talking about. But unfortunately, there's no real codified guidance in one place that, they can look for help because they can't always get help the way we're talking about here. So that's a shortfall of this program. And it was a shortfall of meat and poultry because there was never ever a great guidance document. But some of the new USDA guidance is a whole lot better than it used to be. So I'm just saying there needs to be some kind of codified stamp of approval guidance that industry can use.
Yeah, and I agree completely with that. And I think a lot of it is just the diversity of operations that operate in the food, the FDA non-seafood arena. And it's just such a broad array of different types of processes. And even within meat, which is a lot more singular in terms of, I'll say singular in terms of focus, but a lot more focused in terms of the types of operations you encounter. Again, even that, we look at now, charcuterie is an area where, that is up, is, I'll say currently in the validation needs, and it's hard because there's so many different processes, and there's the expense of going through and doing the validation support for some of these processes that we consider traditional processes. And I know that FDA within their guidance document, although they continue to release sections of that guidance document out. They're including some of this information in there. And some of the stuff may take time, and it may be up to a company to have to go through and develop or, do the expense of doing their own validation support, especially for those types of processes that are, truly unique and truly, I'll say, truly, higher risk types of processes where, maybe they've been doing it for, 50 years or 100 years, but, like, where does that information come from? It's like something just, completely odd. And so sometimes companies are going to have to do that, and yeah, I think it's just going to be very similar to what we just talked about with meat and seafood, is the fact that as time goes on, we'll certainly develop and pull some of these things in. Certainly FDA will pull some of this information in, but a lot of these processes are not going to be readily available just because they're not, it's just such a wide variety of, of different types of processes that are out there.
Annie, could you pull up the last poll question, and go ahead, Donna?
I was just want to say one of the things I do with the classes is that I agree with everything said, and it would be so much easier if they had something like the seafood guidance. I always make sure they know there is some FDA guidance out there, because if anything is listed in that guidance, the inspectors are definitely going to ask about it, which some of my processors, especially like coffee roasters, have no idea that the FDA inspector wants to see their plan for how they're controlling for a toxin that they never even heard of. So I make sure they know what's available out there. And then that supplemental information, one of the things I do is everybody who comes through a class, we give them a couple of page-long list of where can you go for process authorities, where can you go for the people who are experts in these different areas, because depending on what it is they make, who is it that's going to be able to help them. So we have the New Jersey Food Processors Association as far as the very local people. And then, you guys, a lot of you that are here on this call, I'll give them names of people, say, look, in your area or in your type of product, these are people you should look at. These are the publications you should look for. And one of the things that I think helps them a lot too is to point out to them that if they want to just do, if they want to Google something, make sure that they're not just trying to pull information from a journal, because now they're going to have to pay $60 to get a print or whatever. So look for the university affiliations, the USDA, FDA affiliations in the line of the authors. So, I'll point out Dr. Schaffner at Rutgers has got hundreds of food safety publications. A lot of them would help you, be support for your validation, and you could get them free off the Rutgers website. So just point them out ways to find this stuff more easily. And Eurofins has the food plant validation type thing. iFish has it. So I'll point them out to the process authorities and the centers that do this type of work. And, that's just part of the handout material I give them when they come take the classes. Look, I know you probably don't have all these resources, but here's some that aren't actually published. Here's some that would help you get to that point. And a lot of them is just making sure they understand that the verification stuff that you do, starting out with your records review and your calibrations, et cetera. And then the validation is all that scientific stuff. And you probably have to go somewhere else for that. And that's where I try to give them lots of supplemental material on the places to go for the scientific information. So I know that chapter in the book is really, really small on sources of information, but we try to make sure we give them a lot more sources of information. And are all of you aware of the Sean Stevens has put out that his group has the recall registry now that is better than FDA's, the searchable database by year, by product, by company. So helping them with if you need to even do this work with your supply chain based on what's been recalled in the past and so forth. So helping them with how much of this stuff you need to do. You must address these things. If it's been a recall already, then the FDA is going to expect you to be having something written up about how you make sure this doesn't happen to you. So also directing them towards those easier sources of information.
All right. So we are sort of running into the second round of discussion, but I'll just wrap up with question 3. So the results were roughly, it was a 47-53 split of yes and unsure. And so I guess sort of our follow-up questions are, does anyone have success stories from working one-on-one with processors? And also based on yesterday, could further embracing online instruction be beneficial? Like you record the lecture section and then you have a synchronous portion where it's just working people through the workbooks. So they're able to view the video. And if they don't like thumbing through the big book, they can still have their own video of the presentation. And then the synchronous portion is the workbook exercise. That could be an opportunity for online instruction, because I've been doing a lot of that for both PCHF and for my normal university classes that I've been TAing. So if anybody has any opinions on that, please contact me. I can be reached at my Terpmail email address, since I'm at the University of Maryland College Park. So it's just agilber1@terpmail.umd.edu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I think that was really useful. And thank you guys for a really good discussion. I'm really excited to see how all of this comes together and how it helps you, Andrea, to formulate that final needs assessment. It's so essential to our work to understand where processes are at. And I think this is a really helpful project on that.